Zeke followed Luke and Pete as they approached the cabin. If you think it looks cozy from out here, wait till you see the inside, Luke said. Zeke saw the cabin was a good place for him and Genevieve to rest. The best part of how secluded it was, a big worry for him about Wellington, if it ever existed, was the fame that could attract bandits and scavengers. At least his cabin would be easily missed unless a person was suspiciously looking for it. Zeke pulled out of his thoughts when he saw someone exit the cabin with a hunting rifle in hand. He didn't look too happy. Zeke stopped altogether when still holding on to Genevieve as turned around and saw, looking over his shoulder, he saw the younger man wasn't not welcoming. He ran up to Luke and Pete. "Luke, Uncle Pete, what the fuck?" the young man inquired. "Who the hell are they?" Zeke could feel Genevieve tighten her grip on his sweatshirt. She was scared, but after being in this whole world for her life, she knew that crying would only make things worse. The only thing Zeke could do was to comfort her, was to rub her back. "Nick, calm down. It's just a boy and a baby," Pete said. "You don't know that. They could be working for Carver." "What are you thinking?" the young man Nick inquired. "Come on, Nick, a baby and a teenager? I know Carver is probably desperate to find us, but do you really think he would have the patience to deal with either?" Luke said. The woman had a stocky man soon joined the group, looked at Zeke with questioning stares. The woman's eyes softened when she saw the toddler. "What's going on here?" the woman asked. Zeke was surprised to see a toddler's head move, looked at the woman, plus her grip on his sweatshirt loosened. This was the first woman Genevieve had seen who wasn't about to kill her. She was curious, especially after having a man and a boy as her only caregivers her whole life. "Rebecca, these two had brought back a couple of Carver's spies," Nick said. "Now hold on," Pete said. "He told us that he was with the baby's father and they got separated." "Did you check them for bites?" Nick asked. Pete crossed his arms and sighed. "No, I admit that I didn't do that." "So freaking stupid. What were you thinking?" Nick snapped. "I was thinking that baby is very rare now these days. Seriously, when was the last time you've ever seen a baby?" Pete said. "He's got a point," the stocky man said. He smiled and looked at the toddler. The toddler kept a stare on the woman named Rebecca. "She likes you, Beck," the man said. Rebecca smiled at the baby and she said, "Hi." The toddler was a little confused and curious. However, she did reply, "Hi," Genevieve said in a quiet voice. She was eyeing the woman intently. "She is so cute," Rebecca said. "Yeah, her name is Genevieve. You're the first woman she's ever met," Zeke said. Rebecca frowned and she said, "Where's her mother?" Zeke shook his head and he said, "She died giving birth to her." "Aw," Rebecca said. Zeke knew that she felt bad for the toddler. Genevieve twisted her body around and stretched her arms out for Rebecca to pick her up. Zeke was a bit surprised. He had never seen Genevieve warm up so quickly to a stranger. Given the circumstances, Genevieve was warm and an easy child, but she didn't trust new people immediately. "Won't mind if I hold her?" Rebecca asked. "No, go for it," Zeke said. Rebecca picked up the toddler from Zeke's grip and held the toddler. Rebecca gave the toddler a smile, but Genevieve could only respond by staring at Rebecca. "This doesn't change anything," Nick said. Rebecca rolled her eyes and said, "Nick, give it a rest. If the baby was bit, she would be really fussy right now, and she'd be fainting out of consciousness." "What about him?" Nick inquired, aiming the hunting rifle at Zeke. "I'm not bitten," Zeke said. "Carlos should have a look at him," Nick said. "Okay, I'll go get him," Luke said. He left the group and went towards the cabin. "In the meantime, why don't you point that thing to elsewhere?" Pete said, gesturing the gun. "Not taking my chances," Nick said, as he kept his gun aimed at Zeke. Zeke sighed as it was tense. The last thing he wanted to see to happen was this idiot asshole to get him shot. If the gunshot didn't kill him, the infection probably would. And by some strange coincidence that the infection didn't kill him, Omid would certainly have found him in Genevieve. Several intense minutes passed until Luke came out of the cabin with a Hispanic man. He must have been Carlos. Something was off about him. Something he didn't like. They walked down from the porch and approached the group. Is this him? Carlos asked. He was at a tone of disgust in his voice. Yeah, that's Zeke, Luke replied. Carlos sighed before he checked the teenager for a temperature. He's not warm, Carlos said before he checked Zeke's arms and face. Nick grumbled and said, This isn't how we do things, man. If he is bit, he should be put down. We can't lose more people. Nick, we don't know if he's bit. Let Carlos look at him, all right? Luke said. Zeke noticed a movement from the cabin's door. His eyes went when he saw a teenage girl at the door's entrance. He hadn't seen someone around his age in a while. Who is he? The girl asked. She seemed nice. Sarah, what did I just say? Stay inside, Carlos said to the teenager. She slowly retreated inside, but she kept her gaze on Zeke. Zeke did the same as his gaze was on her. She was cute, but he never gotten along with girls in the past. There were a couple, but he later found out they were manipulating him. The girl finally closed the door, and Zeke looked back to the group. Soon Carlos, finished the examination, stood up. Zeke pulled his hooded sweatshirt sleeves down and waited for the doctor's verdict along with the rest of the group members. Well, was he bit? Nick asked. No, but we don't know him. He could be a stranger to the group as well as the girls, Carlos said. Besides, he might be working for Carver. I'm not, Zeke said. Well, we'll see, Carlos said. Carlos, come on. The boy can't be all bad if he's looking after a baby. He's quite happy, seems, Pete said. Well, if he was bad, he would have left her to die. He's right, Rebecca said. It doesn't matter. We don't know him. Thus we can't trust him. He'll stay inside the shed until we can trust him, Carlos said. How am I supposed to gain your trust if I'm in a shed? Zeke inquired. You'll have to come out and help us with tasks in a few days. Then we'll decide if we can trust you, Carlos said. So what am I, slave labor? Zeke inquired, aiming a stare at Carlos. Call it whatever you want. We're doing this to keep everyone safe, Carlos said. He then turned to Luke and said, Take him to the shed. Carlos, I don't think that is right, Luke said. We all have things that we're not proud of, Luke, but we do it to protect ourselves, Carlos said. Luke, this is for the best, Nick said. I can't agree with this. You all could do this if you want, but don't expect me to go along with it, Luke said. Fine, I guess Nick will have to take him to the shed, Carlos said. He turned his head and made a gesture for Nick to escort Zeke out of the shed. Nick nodded and went up to the boy. Go, Nick ordered. Zeke sighed and then turned around, made his way towards the shed. He left behind Genevieve's bag so the group could look after her. He just hoped that Carlos wasn't going to go anywhere near her. Zeke could hear Genevieve start to whine, which quickly became crying. He could hear Rebecca trying to soothe the toddler, but to no avail. It's all right, Jen, Zeke called out to the toddler. However, a gunshot sounded when made him stumble. The bullet nearly hit him. He turned around and glared at Nick, who had almost shot him. Don't do that, Nick spat. He was acting like someone who almost got shot. Zeke got up and approached Nick. If you ever shoot me in my direction again, I will kill you. I can deal with your bullshit, but the minute you start threatening to take my life, I will kill you. You understand? Zeke snapped. Nick was taken aback by the boy's sudden range. However, it was followed by an angry expression forming on his face. Fuck you, Nick snapped, before he brought back the rifle to strike Zeke. Zeke readied for himself for another beating. However, it never came. Someone was holding back from Nick to striking him. Get the hell off of me, Nick snapped as he wrestled away from the person who was holding him back. It was Pete holding him back. Then calm your ass down, Pete snapped. He was giving me shit, Nick said. And whose fault is that? If you can't get a hold of yourself, then I'll take him to the shed, Pete said. You of all people know better than to hit some boy. Nick growlingly said, Whatever. He then turned back to Zeke and said, Go inside. Zeke obliged and went inside the shed without another word. At least Genevieve wasn't crying anymore. Rebecca must have calmed her down. The doors to the shed were slammed shut behind him. He could hear Pete and Nick argue about something, but he couldn't make it out. Zeke then huffed and allowed himself to rest on the floor. The shed had some wood inside, a workbench and a tackle box, and some shelving. He wasn't so sure if there was any tools or possible weapons inside. Either way, he was going to relax. He figured that Genevieve would be safe, Plus he was tired, and looking after a toddler, no matter how patient she was exhausting. He had laid down on the rough ground and allowed himself to drift off to sleep. There was nothing else to do. This was probably the best shelter he had seen for weeks. What's going on out there? Clementine asked. I don't know, Sarah said. Clementine quirked an eyebrow. Sarah was acting very strange. It was as if she was in another world. Finally, Clementine's questions were answered when the group walked inside. I'm really disappointed in you, Luke. You should have done the right thing, Carlos said. The right thing? Locking up that boy in the damn shed is the right thing to do now? Luke snapped. We had to lock him up. It was a concern of our safety for our loved ones, Carlos said. No, that boy is a menace, and this is wrong. This is exactly what Carver would do, Luke said as he turned and stomped to the kitchen. Carlos sighed before he shook his head up. He looked to turn to see Sarah and said, How are you doing, sweetie? Sarah asked as she looked up. Oh yeah, I'm fine. Carlos quirked an eyebrow before he said, All right. He then walked away from the girls and made his way upstairs. What's this? Clementine asked. She gasped as she saw the baby in her adoptive mother's arms. A big smile formed on her face and said, Is that a baby? Rebecca chuckled at the moment her daughter's excitement, and she said, Yes, she is. You want to hold her? Yes, please, Clementine said. Rebecca walked over and sat down next to Clementine, handed herself the toddler to Clementine, whose smile remained. The toddler looked at Clementine with wide eyes before she looked around the rest of the cabin. She's so cute. Where did you find her? That young boy had her, Rebecca said. He said that she had never been around women before, and her mother died when she was born. Aw, that's sad, Rebecca said as her smile faded to a frown. Yeah, Rebecca said, starting to rub her daughter's back to comfort her. What about her dad? Clementine asked. That boy said he got separated from the baby's dad, Rebecca said. I guess it was recent since she seems to be doing okay. What's the boy's name? Sarah asked. Zeke, Sarah, Rebecca said. A small smirk formed on her lips and said, Now, Sarah, you're starting to have a little crush on him. What? No, of course not, Sarah exclaimed in a surprised tone of her voice as she started blushing. I think you do, Rebecca teased. Do not, Sarah looked as she said and led away. Clementine knew it was a lie. She did see Sarah blush before she turned away. I think I'm going to read a book or something, Sarah said before she got up and went upstairs. Clementine turned to back at her mother and she said, I think she likes him. Oh, I do too. Now, don't give me any ideas. You're not allowed to start dating until you're in your 20s, Rebecca said. Well, that's too far away, Clementine said. How about when I'm 15? Nope, way too young, Rebecca teased. Clementine rolled her eyes and she said, You're no fun. Absolutely, Rebecca joked. Hours passed within the cabin, and Clementine had spent most of their day playing with the toddler with Rebecca. Alvin was outside keeping watch, and Luke had joined them about an hour ago. He still seemed very upset. Nick was upstairs, probably sulking again or sleeping. Sarah was also upstairs. She was also very quiet. It did make Clementine curious about the child, was more interested in playing with the baby. Finally, Carlos was busy making dinner for the group. Pete was in the room with Clementine, watching Clementine interact with the daughter as she walked over to Rebecca as Clementine showed Genevieve to put the blocks on top of each other. You better enjoy this time, Pete said as she sat down next to Rebecca. Kids are fun, but teenagers are a pain. Trust me, I know. I'm not looking forward to her growing up, Rebecca said. Clementine frowned and said, Why? I'd like to grow up. I know, but your daddy and I aren't ready. You're our first child, Clem, Rebecca said. I know, but once I'm grown up, I can help you guys, Clementine said. Don't focus on that, Clem. Just focus on being a kid. It doesn't last long unless you're considering my nephew, Pete said. He's had it rough, Rebecca said. We've all had it rough. He needs to grow up and stop acting like a child, Pete said. We got real kids in here who needs us to step up, and he's got to do the same. He'll come around. Try not to worry too much, Rebecca said. Pete sighed and he said, All right, I'll try not to worry too much. Carlos walked into the living room and said, Dinner's ready.